This update, it is February 27th, 2024. The time is 10:01 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there changes to the agenda?
No changes.
All right, public comments. Okay.
Good morning, Ron Hartman. I just have a couple suggestions for the start of this meeting.
Is the green light on?
Try again.
Thank
Ron
you.
Hartman. I just have a few suggestions, and they're suggestions for this meeting and the other one. First, the Justice Center upgrades. My suggestions are, before you make any decisions on these, you need to have the builder provide samples in a one-page product information thing about the product. For instance, the ceiling. Ceiling only performs two functions. One's appearance and one is acoustic, the other's acoustics. If I'm going to change the material, I'd like to know the decibel improvement in the room if I spend that money. And I don't mean 1 or 2 decibels. And if they can't provide it, then I don't think they've got an adequate product. The countertops. On those, you can choose, I think, about any color you want in laminate, and there's no difference in cost. If you get into granite or those, the color and the corner far dictate the price. And if you don't know what colors you're going with, you don't know the price of that other countertop. The sinks. I just used the lavatory in here. That drop mount sink is plenty clean all around it. The laminate shows no wear on it at all. I mean, the bathroom looks fine. I think you need to consider that. The other one, the Kootenai Electric Building. I went out there this past week and drove around it. I found the gas pump in that back parking lot, filling station style. I'm going to assume that that tank was buried when the building was built, and it's my understanding the building was around 1970. That put that tank at 50 years old. I'm assuming also it's a steel tank. Back then they didn't have plastic tanks. It's probably close or has been leaking, and I don't think we know that. I don't think we know if there's any fuel in it. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves trying to remodel this building without having all the safety inspections done, and if they find something, what the price is, getting quotes to clean it up. I could see you quickly running out of budget here if you don't have this information before you start doing improvements. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our first item is the Justice Center update from Turner, Townsend, Heery, and David Mendez.
Thank you. David Mendez with Turner and Townsend, Heery, for the record. I have distributed a cost update sheet for you. We can go through that in detail. But first, we did have meetings with the bailiffs and prosecutors and the contractor last week. Some back and forth to make sure did it what we call a page turner. So we've gone through the sheets one by one with staff so that we can try to avoid some mistakes or miscommunications on how the building works, how the doors work, how the office layouts are. We had a couple of fruitful comments at this point. There are a couple of things that will be additional costs. We talked about the ADA access into the bathrooms, so they are incorporating that, and that should be a cost that comes up here in the probably as part of CCD 5.
We had planned to put that on the betterments log.
The betterments log, okay. Let's see, schedule update. The contractor's updated his schedule. There's some minor adjustments in how the different activities, the work activities on site are going to occur because of how tight the site is and some things that they've run into. The overall completion date has not changed. Back to the cost update. So the cost update report that you have, and I apologize for not giving you a chance to review this in advance of the meeting. All I've done with this, if you look at the top in the black, the construction GMP, if you look at the subtotal, that is what our current contract is with the contractor. That is our GMP. Bid alternates, I've shown the change to the flooring change. That's a minus 72,000. And I've shown CCD 04. So in the upper number and the subtotal, you've got two items, the construction contingency and the design contingency. The number down below on number 4, line number 4, is will be a negative, so we'll draw down from those contingencies as we go through the project. And so I'll keep a running total of what those are. You'll see the individual items and the detail and the backup information for each one of those CCDs as we go through the project. So all this will show is then that total of the drawdown, but each one of those individual items for the changes, I'll review those with you in this open format, and so everybody knows what we've agreed to. The next below the line items are mainly budgets. So as we get quotes in for various items of work, those will be refined. And as you see in the second page then, the subtotal of those soft costs below line 32 is where we're at and where we estimate those soft costs to be. You've got your owner carried contingency as the next line, and then the summary of the expense lines then are at the bottom of that. The items in yellow are going to be items that Brandy will address with you in this afternoon's meeting, and that's funding related. John has joined us just in case there are any questions. Next Tuesday, we plan to have the betterments finalized and ready for you to look at those numbers. As we looked from last week's meeting, we had on the betterments, we had item number 1, which was the increased concrete slab thickness, and the acoustical automatic door bottoms were items 1 and 7. Let's just include that discussion, and if we want to take action on that, then we can at next week's meeting.
So any, excuse me, any official change order will come before us at a business meeting. So this meeting will just be talking about it.
Okay.
So if you have a change order ready to be submitted, then just make sure with Sarah that it gets on the business meeting.
So when you take action on it, you would do in your Thursday meeting. So if we
Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So for instance, if you have 2 of the 3 say that we want this betterment or we want this change, then you can bring it forward at a business meeting. We'll approve it then.
Okay.
So that's why I just want to make sure that we're staying on top of things that are time sensitive, because you mentioned 2 things last week that were time sensitive. So are we still expecting a direction on those?
Not today.
Okay.
So we're good for today. We'll have all of those to you. We can present the total list next week, and if there's something that needs to take action, then we could. Or do you need more advance notice than that?
Yeah. So by Friday, that's when we put the things on the business meeting. So if we're going to, there's different levels of action, I think, and there's been some confusion on that. For the Board of Commissioners to approve something, it has to be listed as an action item, but we like to do everything with funding in the business meeting at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So for instance, if we're talking about all these changes next Tuesday morning, they're not going to be able to be approved Tuesday at 2 o'clock. They'll be the following Tuesday. So if there's anything that you need approved by a certain date, make sure that you know it's a Friday cutoff.
Is it possible where they could put it on the business meeting as well? And that way, if we agree to it in the status update, it's there for us, so you could put it on both, and Sarah could help you with that.
Okay.
And if we don't agree to it, then we'll just skip over it as far as a business meeting item.
Yeah, I think the only caveat to doing that is typically when you're talking about a change order, it's a form and it has all of the additions and deductions on it. So if we're telling you Tuesday morning at 10, I don't think you'll have that document ready for us by 2 o'clock that afternoon. So just some things, that constraints that we have to operate under.
Okay.
To pay attention. And we can always hold, like, for instance, you know, tomorrow you discover something, we can always get it on Thursday or Friday, a special meeting, in order to give you direction to bring it forward on Tuesday, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So, yeah, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of our time constraints and we don't get caught like, oh, well, if we had it approved last week, we'd have been fine, but now it's this problem. So, if that makes sense. All right. Are you done with your,
Yeah, so if you have any questions, I can, both John and I are here to answer any questions you might have on schedule, costs, the report.
okay, Bill, questions? No? All right. Bruce?
The only question I have is just from your, I take it all of your additional soft costs and owner-carried contingency, but mostly the soft costs are based upon your professional opinion from what you've seen from other projects, correct?
Correct. One that you'll discuss in funding this afternoon is the what we get from the state for that funding mechanism, and then I'm trying to provide for that in this estimate of if we don't get that additional funding from the state. So I've included a coverage in that. So hopefully if we do get that funding, and you can work out the details of that with Brandy, she's more up to date on what the state has said.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
okay.
Right. All right, thank you so much. All right, item number 2, Noxious Weeds Advisory Board update with Mr. Kelly Hansen, who is our chairman of the Noxious Weeds Advisory Board.
So I don't need any introduction. Thank you very much. Yes, I've been involved with the Noxious Weed Board. I found out yesterday, since 2007. Long enough to know better, right? Anyway, so I've seen a lot of progression of it, how it's evolved and how it's gone through the years. And I just got a little one-page bio of kind of what their activities have been. First of all, does everybody here know what a noxious weed is? What does it mean, noxious? Does it mean poisonous?
No.
Not necessarily, but there are some toxic ones. So their noxious weeds are defined as any kind of a weed that's not native to our area, and it comes in, it has no natural bugs or anything that's going to fight it, and it just grows like crazy. You all heard of knapweed, our county weed? It just grows everywhere. That's just a definition of a noxious weed. So as per Idaho code, it's the duty of the landowners to regulate and moderate the weeds. And there's a publication that's put out probably more of a notice, I guess, in Nicholsworth once a year. Maybe they have to legally do that. That says, all right, landowners, it's up to you to control these weeds. You must do that. And that's probably how I first discovered and joined the weed board many years ago. Because I'm a master gardener. Weeds are a big deal, and I'm an organic gardener, so pesticides are not on my to-do list. But we found that it's a necessary evil. As per Idaho code, the Noxious Weed Control Board is required to inspect all lands within the county for noxious weeds, map infestations, I'll abbreviate this for you, educate landowners and the public to why there's noxious weeds. And with that note, one of the things that I've missed here this last few years is since the North Idaho Fair became the Idaho Fair and became 10 days with the requirement of anybody that's in a booth to be in the booth full-time for 10 days. We just don't have the staff to do it. And that was something I really enjoyed as a board member, going to and sitting with another professional. People, the public would come in, they'd bring weeds to that booth and ask them what they are. And that's a really big loss to us, I think, for public, for reaching a lot of the members of the public is that thing. I tried to last year to get the fair board to give us a booth, not required to be manned, and give it to us for free. It didn't happen. So it's probably something I'll pursue this year, but at least have the information there, like this incredible book that everybody should have, and it's all free. All you should go pick one up today. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's just one thing about it. And so education is important. Another thing that they do is they inspect all lands systematically. And our newer manager there, Chris, had developed this system, and I'll leave this with you. This is just a grid. And so to make sure that all lands get inspected, it's like, all right, we're gonna inspect all section ones and all the townships this year, and then go on and so forth. Well, it'll take a long time to go through that, but at least it's systematic to do that. I'm real impressed with his inspections. So in 2023, they inspected 134 properties, 2,023 acres, covering 9 of these section 1s. All are mapped in a GIS database, so they can name what weeds are in what plot, etc. In education, we just talked about that. We just printed these new books this last year, and everybody should have a copy of it. It's an incredibly valuable book. It's got full color photographs. It's got control options, whether it be mechanical, cultural, biological, or chemical, what kind of chemicals you use. One of the things that we could do, if you discovered, you go, oh my gosh, I've got hawkweed on my property. It's beautiful, but it's invasive. And you say, right, these certain chemicals are necessary. You could take your chemicals to the weed board. They'll help you mix them. They'll actually get you borrow a backpack sprayer, or if you have a large parcel of property, they'll have it on a four-wheeler. You know how to spray your properties. That's part of the service that they provide. And with that, they had 61 pieces of equipment rented out or given free of charge last year to treat 291 acres of property. And often it's people with larger properties to doing that. Also, they had 281 acres of county-owned properties treated in 2023 by contractors or personnel. And they contract that out for professional weed people to do that. So a part of the education, besides the fair, they have a lot of walk-ins, phone calls. People say, my neighbor's got weeds, what am I going to do with it? Oh, it's knapweed, sorry. But here's what you can do. Presentations to a symbiotic botany class in North Idaho, presentation to elementary students at Farm to Table, assisted with noxious weed quizzes at the North Idaho State Forestry Contest, and have noxious weed and biocontrol workshops with speakers. And speaking of biocontrols, I joined them because I was anti-pesticide. Well, I like biological things. Now, me being in the real estate business over all these years, I've actually been out and shown property, and I see the spotted knapweed, and I see the little weevils on the knapweed doing their job. I remember back in 2007, you go to the fair, or not the fair, the state park up in Athol, and knapweed was this tall. And so they introduced these biologicals, and there's actually there's 2 root boring beetles, 2 seed head feeding beetles, and seed feeding or flies, then weevils, and then a seed feeding moths. So now you go up there, and how tall is the knapweed? It's getting shorter and shorter because they're actually doing a really good job without using any chemicals to do it. A few years ago, they brought in a speaker from the Nez Perce Biocontrol Center down in Lapawai, Idaho. And this is where they actually developed these bugs to do this. So they got a knapweed or a certain thing that you're trying to control. So they got these bugs in a controlled situation because they don't want to let them loose. And they test them for years to make sure all they eat is knapweed and not involved in something else. And then at that time, they said it costs about $1 million to bring each of these bugs to the market because of the extensive research and the time that it takes to do that. So that is really an incredible thing. They got the bio things, and they have bios that are targeting Dalmatian toadflax, which is a very pretty flower. People see them in their yards and they like them. Leafy spurge and spotted knapweed. So I brought you some of these books. Turn to page 65, if you would please. And this is a page that's on leafy spurge. Are you guys familiar with leafy spurge? You need to. Leafy spurge is a very unique plant in that the stems, the flowers, the seeds, everything is a pale green, kind of like you see on the photo here. Get your own book, please. But what the unique thing about this is if you go out and you pick a piece of leafy spurge, it bleeds white sap, kind of like a dandelion. You've all seen that. That white sap is caustic. If children got into it, touched their eyes, or dogs, or livestock, it can burn their mouths. So this is something when I'm out marketing properties out in the country, especially up along the Highway 53 corridor, up there to the north where leafy spurge is kind of prominent on both sides of the road. If leafy spurge is on that property, the landowner or land buyer, even owners, they need to be aware of that, especially if they have children, pets. And horses and cows won't eat it unless there is overgrazing involved. But hogs, llamas, goats will eat it and they can sustain it. So because of the law that the homeowners are required to maintain property, so if you have a noxious weed on your property, if it's leafy spurge, you may need to hire some goats. And another unique thing about the leafy spurge is that you can say, well, we'll just dig it up. Well, you can dig it up, and any little small segment of the root segment will spread. So for a while, and this hasn't happened in recently, a developer said, well, I'm going to develop this 10-acre parcel. The weed people, as I call them, I tell people I'm a weed person, they go, weed. Anyway, I'm not from Washington. At any rate, so they would go out and inspect that land, look for noxious weed. So if they're moving any dirt, they got to make sure that dirt's not transferred somewhere else and they're spreading the noxious weed. And unfortunately, that's only done by request now, not by law. I don't know if that's something you guys have to do with or not, but that would be, I'd love to see that happening again.
Are there actually goats for rent here?
Pardon me?
Are there goats for rent here?
Yeah, there has been. I'm not familiar with them personally, but I know people have done it. They got goats and sheep and llamas actually can do that. So that's part of the control parcel right there. And then you go back to page 51, and this is the hawkweed. There's yellow meadow hawkweed and orange hawkweed, very pretty flower. And the problem with this particular weed is that if it gets on the property, it's a perennial or a biennial. The first year it makes a little rosette, just a little rosette's kind of there. The second year it pops up this flower about this tall, orange or yellow, and it flowers and the seeds pop out like a dandelion. So the second year you got the flower. The second year you got a 5 or 10 square feet. The third year you got an acre. And this stuff squeezes out the natural grasses like on grasslands. So this is incredibly important to control if you have livestock or grasslands like that. So that's just another one that I wanted to point out. And then this last one, well, I mentioned the spotted knapweed, milkweed. Let's see. I guess we addressed spurge. Well, also in the book, you might notice that in the book, it says toxic, and that's the reason for it. And also in the toxic area, there are a whole list of toxic weeds, and they're probably in your yard. Dalmatian toadflax is a pretty flower. People like them. Poison hemlock. At any rate, so that's kind of the overview of the thing. So over my almost 17 years or 15 years I've been on the board, back when we first started, they had 2 or 3 people on staff. They hired temporary people during the summer. And now we have one person doing the entire job. So what I've seen is that the
Do you need me to get something?
efficiency of the board's got incredibly efficient. It's probably less because there's fewer people on staff than not the temporary people. And what Chris has done that's managing that out there, he has really done an incredible job of organizing and being systematically looking at the properties and creating good information and educational materials for the public. I'm really proud of him for that. I'm proud to be a part of that. So I see myself and the other board members that are on there. I've seen a lot come and go. We've got a couple of realtors on the board. We've got landowners, ranchers that are on the board, just members of the public. And all of our goal is to educate the public, to help understand, like the leafy, the knapweed. Yeah, we're getting it down, but each plant can produce 50,000 seeds that are viable for 8 years. So you got 5 acres and you take care of your weeds and she doesn't. You do it for 8 years and she's not, they still have seeds blowing into your property. So that's that's why it spreads so much. That's why the controls are so important. So I think I've covered all this stuff here that I think is important. Any questions?
Questions from Kelly? No? Any questions?
I'm always amazed at the degree of detail different subject matters can go into, and even more amazed with people who have a green thumb. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I enjoy being a part of it, and I really encourage, the previous version of this book wasn't as pretty as this one. It wasn't bound like this, but I have taken literally hundreds of those and given them to real estate offices around the county and trying to educate realtors because they're out there on the land seeing it. They need to have it. I think this book should be in everybody's car. If you know somebody that's a hunter, a landowner, or a gardener, they should have this book and have a second one to give to somebody that they know. And they're free, and they're an incredibly beautiful resource. So, not like I said, just so to list them, biological controls, how to take care of them, and it's just a really great resource out there. So I'm really proud to be a part of that board.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is Historic Preservation Applicant Interview. Come on up to a table and you can just push the, you can come all the way up to the front if you like. Yeah, just push the button and you can just leave it right on the table.
There we go.
Yeah. And if you'd state your name for us.
My name is Lauren McCroskey.
Okay. And I apologize for the setting, but we wanted to get you going as soon as we could. And so we wanted to get the interview in and be able to appoint you if the board believes that you will fit in there. So we have a few questions. And would one of you like to start with the question?
Sure.
Okay.
Ms. McCroskey? I'm Commissioner Matari. First question is, why are you interested in becoming a member of this board?
I kind of expected that. Well, let's see, I have about a 34-year career in historic preservation. I've worked at the state historic preservation level, serving as a National Register coordinator. I'm an architectural historian by training, and until last April, I was employed. I have now retired, and I feel that with my background and being retired and having some time on my hands now, I'd like to give back and contribute. And one of those ways makes sense to me is to draw from my career. And I'm also I consider myself a native of the area. I grew up in Spokane and spent my summers at my grandmother's place at the south end of the lake. Spent a number of years in the Seattle area and moved back here in the last three and a half years. So this area is near and dear to my heart, and I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for me to apply what I know and what I love and contribute in that way.
Great, thank you. Have you previously served on committees, either professionally or personally, where you've had to deal with varied personalities, and how did you handle conflict among the board members?
Oh, yes, yes. For about 8 years, I was the chair of the King County Landmarks Commission, which is the Historic Preservation Commission that serves the greater area around Seattle, the unincorporated areas, very rural issues. And we did have a number of controversial issues at times, major development pressures in that area, as you can imagine, and that we have here now. I think it's just a matter of allowing every voice to be heard and being thoughtful and trying to understand what each person is feeling about the historic environment, why it matters to them or doesn't matter. And just, trying to hear all those voices and let people tell their stories. I think that's the most important thing for me.
All right. Question 3?
What relationship or contact have you had with the tribe?
With the tribe? Let's see. I've had just, I haven't had much interaction with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. I know a couple of members through some events at the Cataldo Mission. I've had some interaction there. In my role in Western Washington, I did deal with a number of tribal issues. As National Register Coordinator for the state of Washington, we often dealt with what are called traditional cultural properties and determining whether they meet the requirements for registering special places in the National Register. So we had a number of issues like that where I was able to deal with tribes and get their perspectives.
How about homes? We went through this a couple of years ago with some of the buildings that were now using as a music conservatory.
Oh, the Hamilton.
Were you following that much?
That was occurring just as we moved here, so I sort of missed that event, but I'm aware of it.
They were very interesting because to a lot of people that was a very important building, but it also had some problems in terms of lead contamination, asbestos,
Right.
mold. It's still a historic building, but it was just,
Right.
it's all worked out. But
Those are often very scary issues for people, and like any property, even a 20-year-old property needs maintenance and attention, and I think if we just accept that and tackle that in a way that's, makes sense for today's codes and new materials, but also finding a way to make them apply them sensitively to to old buildings. I think there's a compromise there.
And do you see your job as making the community aware of historic sites or buildings? Because I don't think a lot of people know about them. I don't think about them.
I think that's one of the most important roles, really, of a Historic Preservation Commission, because there is so little awareness of, most of us see the contemporary buildings and structures, and there's such a rich heritage out there that most Idahoans aren't aware of. And a really important place to do that is getting younger people involved in understanding that they have a historic environment and understanding their connections to those who've come before them, and why that can matter and how they can live together with that past, but also make it work for today. So I think that's one of the most important things we do.
Thank you.
What skills and experience in group dynamics would you bring to the advisory board that would make you an effective member?
Well, I think I gained my greatest experience as the chair of the Landmarks Commission in King County. We dealt with a number of very controversial issues and development pressures. I think that's probably where I draw my greatest experience. And it was a learning experience for me. I think any of us who serve on commissions, it's as much of a learning experience as it is a giving back experience. And I think I was able to grow in that role and understand my role as a mediator and trying to find balance between the different perspectives that people have. Those who want to preserve historic resources, those who don't, those who feel that they can be an obstruction to progress, and those who feel that that they can have a compromise and find a way to adapt them to work in our current lives. So I'd say that's my biggest skill.
Describe your community involvement.
My community involvement. Well, I would say that has increased a lot since April after I retired, as I think I've become involved in looking at some historic preservation needs in the community. I've also helping with a grant application for a local church that is hoping to return its building to a more historic appearance and presentation. I've also been involved in some issues in the Silver Valley area, looking at ways to find some kind of better healthcare outreach for some of the citizens who have led health issues. So that's something I've been involved in. I'm just kind of starting at, when you're in the work life, you don't have as many of those opportunities, but now I find I do. So I'm kind of tapping around and looking for ways to be more of a community person. And I'm really enjoying that, what I've been able to do so far. Found it really meaningful.
Great, thank you. Bruce?
What do you see is the fundamental role of this advisory board?
I think the advisory board's biggest role is to provide another perspective in the greater picture of what happens in the county, whether it's new construction, development, change. I think its role is just to provide that additional perspective about how historic resources can actually dovetail with a lot of things that the county may want to accomplish, that we're not an obstruction, we're an opportunity to have another dialogue, and I think mostly to provide a pause in a lot of the planning that goes on. There's no interest in having a commission that is obstructive or adversarial. It should be an opportunity to pause and say, okay, how do these resources matter to us? How can they fit into our other plans? and just to, I think, provide more tools in the box for decision-making.
Okay. Bill, did you want to ask the last question?
No,
on
no,
the
you
list?
go ahead.
Okay.
Great.
What do you think is the great challenge or issue this board may be involved with?
Well, I'm aware that the I-90 widening project is coming down the pike, and that, of course, will, it will go into some areas that may have historic resources and may need to have consideration for how we either mitigate the loss of those or find ways to preserve them and reuse them. So I'm aware that that's one of our bigger challenges coming down the line. I think working also with the city of Coeur d'Alene, there is a lot of overlap there. So the challenges are similar, but they're also different in that you have, historic commercial districts, you have a lot of housing. The county has more dispersed historic resources that can be isolated. So I think finding a way to make the public understand, what the commission's role is always going to be key. How can we help you? How can we help the county government make better decisions? In other voice, again.
Okay. And have you been to a meeting already?
Yes, I've actually been to 3.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, so what will happen now is staff will collect at least 2 out of 3 votes and put this matter on for the 2 o'clock business meeting next Tuesday.
Okay.
And do you know when the next historic preservation meeting is?
Oh, I should know that.
If you don't, it's okay. I just was trying to time it that, hopefully next Tuesday isn't after the next one.
No, actually, we had a meeting last week. It's
Okay.
it's usually in the middle of the month. So
Okay.
the middle Wednesday.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the next week should be good timing-wise.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for volunteering.
Thank you.
I know it pays a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yep, you bet. All right, item 4, assessor role correction, and Mr. Kovacs.
Commissioners, Bela Kovacs, Kootenai County Assessor. Thank you for letting us come before you today. I'd like to first of all begin by introducing formally my new Chief Deputy, Dyson Savage, who's seated right next to me. He's been with the county for the better part of over a year. He has some very strong technical abilities, and I think Kootenai County will benefit tremendously from having him serve as our Chief Deputy. I also would like to point out that if there are technical questions, we do have, and we have asked that Sam Wilkins with XTR be on the line. He's available for some technical questions, as well as Dyson can field some other more technical questions. I'd like to begin by giving you a little history, which I think will put it properly in perspective. We're talking about the end-of-the-year rolls. When I generically use the phrase end-of-the-year rolls, I'm referring to the occupancy of the sub-roll, which includes the real property, personal property 2, and the missed property rolls. Kootenai County, for whatever reason, has historically not done the subsequent roll in the November timeframe, but has historically done those property, saved all those, and has done them at the end of the year. So I'm referring to those as the end-of-the-year property rolls. Historically, typically, there are about, and this goes back probably 10 years or more, 3,500 to 4,000 parcels that have errors at the end of the year. I cannot speak to the technical reasons as to why, but has to do with implementations and the customizations that Kootenai County has implemented the system with. These can be up to 20 or so data fields, give or take, per parcel, which roughly amounts to about 35,000 to 40,000 lines of errors that occur at the end of the year. It was historically a major time crunch to get our appraisal techs to produce the property rolls at the close of the calendar year. I'm going to jump back to the January of 2023. When we updated our contract with XTR, we knew we had problems, that was one of them. When we contracted with XTR, we began focusing on the low-hanging fruit. This was one of those targeted projects to work on. It took XTR the better part of the first half of 2023 until around June to come up with the programmatic fixes, and at which point we decided to go ahead and focus the efforts of the XTR contract to get that done. And then what we ended up doing was testing that fix. Around the same time frame last year, the state legislature came up with House Bill 292, which was an extremely complex House bill. It involved both the treasurer and assessor side of the database. My understanding is programmatically it affected more of the calculations on the treasurer side than on the assessor side. At that time in June, I did ask XTR to evaluate. Let me back up. I actually reached out to the State Tax Commission because I know that Kootenai County is unique in its implementation. We do require some extra help, which historically we have not received from the Tax Commission. I knew that the State Tax Commission was going to do programmatic changes to the system for all of the other counties that are on the same systems that we are on. And I asked that they would please take into consideration and work on and include Kootenai County as part of that solution, and they did. We did get a copy of the script that the Tax Commission produced. I did ask XTR to evaluate it for about $1,000. You might remember that there was a little bit of controversy that came up last year. When I did ask the XTR to do that, it cost us about $1,000. But they determined that some of the programmatic fixes that were done on the state side were somewhat problematic, potentially, for the treasurer's office. They did not see any problems for the assessor's office. We had a conference call with the treasurer. They offered providing solution and services to the treasurer's office. I believe the treasurer's office at that time decided to go on its own. The better part of the summer of last year, we focused our efforts on bringing Kootenai County into parity with the state as well as with Canyon County, so that we could rely on the fixes by the Idaho State Tax Commission. If we were on the same versions as Canyon County and the other counties were using and the state was using, then we felt that we would be in a better position to utilize those system fixes. As far as we know, that the fixes were going to be a success. They were going to reduce our errors, our end-of-the-year errors, from 35,000 to 40,000 errors down to about 10, a factor of 10, to about 3,500 to 4,000 errors. When we completed the end-of-the-year property rolls last year, the results turned out to be just as we expected. We had in the range of about that many errors. Staff followed the processes, but you will recall that we did have a change in staff in 2023. We had new appraisal techs or new BIAs working in that area. What we did not know is the end-of-the-year roll processes were done uniquely in Kootenai County. The system is very complex. It's like a hodgepodge of different processes. In some instances, we're similar to the State Tax Commission or other counties. In some instances, we're not. In some instances, we rely on the processes used by the software maker. In some instances, we cannot. What we did not know is last year, when to produce the property rolls, we cannot rely on the software maker's original documentation. So when we produced the rolls, that was all the documentation we had, and that's what was done. That did result in about 7 errors for 7 parcels, which came to the attention of the treasurer at the beginning part of this year. We began working with the treasurer because we didn't want that to impact the treasurer's office. So we agreed to contract with XTR to create a system fix to alleviate the manual corrections that the treasurer's office would have to do. As I recall, that was probably around January 10th that we began focusing on that. What I didn't know at the time, and the statutes are not super clear, is that the roll for the missed roll has to be finalized through the Board of County Commissioners before the end of January. So really, at the point in time when we began working on this with the treasurer around January 10th, it was already too late. Nonetheless, we worked diligently. We spent about $11,000 working with XTR to make these programmatic changes and fixes to minimize adverse impact to the treasurer's office. I believe that what compounded the situation was that we discovered in this analysis that some of the programmatic changes that were prepared and provided by the state were problematic. In fact, my understanding is that there's all across the state of Idaho, there are a lot of treasurer's offices that have some imbalance issues because of the House Bill 292 with the PTR calculations. Nonetheless, we spent the better part of about 6 weeks trying to get this fix done. I know that the treasurer's office ran into some challenges as far as testing. And last week, I ended up reaching out to the State Tax Commission because we're getting very late in the process. We need to finalize this roll. We have to submit the missed property roll certified by Monday of next week. And so when I reached out to the State Tax Commission, they gave us guidance. And the guidance that they gave us is they alerted me to the fact that that this all really needs to be finished up by the end of January. We're really done with the January property rolls. We cannot, at this point in time, continue to make changes to the property rolls for 2023. And so the guidance that I've received from them is that, even though these are errors, they do need to be fixed. There is another mechanism for fixing that. It's unfortunate that it's complex because it does involve manual corrections. It's what we have come to know as the tax cancellation process. There is about 25 or so parcels that for whatever reason duplicated the homeowner's exemption. XTR cannot even figure out why it happened because we just don't know why it happened. It's a problem within the computer system.
Can you explain duplicated? Does that mean 2 homeowners exemptions?
Yes. Well, generally, it's close to it. It's not exactly duplicate because it's all based on 50% of value or 120. Go ahead if you want to comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dyson Savage, Chief Deputy Assessor for the record. Nice to meet you all. In regard to the over-applied homeowners exemption, what the system did is it took another snapshot of the value we recorded for the occupancy roll and then applied the same homeowners exemption math that we would on the primary roll. The issue in this instance is these pins already had a homeowners exemption given on the primary roll, so when it came back around, it did it twice. So the value varies because the math was done twice. It's not a direct duplication. This exceeded the cap that's internal in Amentum. There's a $125,000 cap. It just applied it again and added it. It shouldn't have done that. We're still trying to figure out why it ended up doing that. We compile all that information and we'll send that as part of another BOE meeting for you guys to rule on. It is a county error, so under statute, you guys have a determination to make about waiving the homeowner's reclamation or not. We can get into that later, and I'll send you some documentation with exact numbers and what it looks like in terms of that. And some of these pins also have some remaining homeowners exemption that they do qualify for because they weren't maxed out on the primary roll. The issue was the math was done again, and typically occupancy improvements are of greater value than other improvements on the property. It's a house or something like that. So they're typically maxed out on that second one. But there's still about $128,000 across all of the pins that these homeowners qualify for. So just wanted to get you up to speed on that.
One thing I wanted to add, Commissioners, is the guidance that was given to me by the Tax Commission is that at a certain point, the authority over the property rolls transitions out of the hands of the assessor and into the hands of the commissioners. And that was at the end of January. So it's really beyond my authority at this point to implement this computer system fix because I would, in effect, be changing the property rolls. There is a statutory mechanism that allows the commissioners to make these corrections. And as Dyson mentioned, for the homeowner's exemption, it's considered a recovery, which we can do. So,
Can I ask a couple questions? Is that your presentation?
that's all I have at this point.
Because there's a lot of words, a lot of stuff coming at us. So can you kind of boil it down in a thesis statement as to what you want from the board and
Sure.
quantify that so that we understand how many properties are actually affected?
Yeah. So we have about 72 parcels that combined it relates to allocation errors. And that's something that the county has historically done. The guidance that we got from the tax commission is we can't do that as we have typically done.
Yeah, 72 properties.
72.
What do you want us to do exactly here? Tell us.
We're
tell us.
seeking approval from the board. Well, this is, I believe the board cannot make a decision or take an action. This is a status update meeting, is my understanding. So
Yes.
the board has to make a decision at perhaps a 2 o'clock meeting. I guess our request is to see if we could still get it added to an agenda or maybe create another BOE meeting have a board set up a BOE meeting where we can make our recommendation that these corrections be made under the authority of the board so that we can address all these parcels. And I believe it's a total of 103 parcels. You know, we can break them up into different categories, but the grand total is around 103 parcels.
Bela, this is Sam. May I add some color here?
Please.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Sam Wilkins with XTR Consulting, and we haven't been involved in analyzing why things happen. We've been working on what do we do. And I'd like to, real quickly, as far as what I've been able to ascertain, based on the comments that Bela has been able to get from the State Tax Commission, and what Dyson just said, is there's roughly 24 parcels that come under your purview on the law. In other words, the assessor really can't do anything until you approve it. And basically, what Dyson was explaining there is that these fall under a calculation error that happened, and the only way we can can be fixed is you can make a decision on we want these addressed or we don't want these addressed. Some of them would be taxed more, some of them would be taxed less. And I think they're giving you a heads up that that's going to have to take place. And I believe the total amount that is left right now is 125 parcels with problems. So you have the 24 of the homesteads that you have to deal with, and then there's 101 out there. And what the assessor was explaining is, of that 101, according to the State Tax Commission, his hands are tied, which is unfortunate. Because now the fix that we had in place to roll these problems back and to push them forward was going to eliminate a lot of work on the treasury. And we put that into place, and the tax commission is now saying, Bailey, you can't make adjustments to that assessment roll. These are all going to have to be done through a tax charge correction. And that's where I believe the assessor is going to have to go through. They're going to have to manually calculate these things and then give the numbers to the treasurer to go through. I don't believe this falls, and I'm not an expert in Idaho state law, although I've been reading it, but I don't believe this particular side falls under the commissioner's purview. If I may, can I give you a little color on the 3,500 issue?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Chair Duncan. What happened under the House Bill 292? And you'll hear things called PTR, right? PTR is property tax reduction. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. That changed the calculation. When the House Bill went through, it changed how property tax reductions were going to be calculated. And because Kootenai has a specific configuration setup that is different than the rest of Idaho, the assessor had asked the State Tax Commission, would you guys program this for us? They agreed to. But they're dealing with 44 other counties in the state, and they're managing all of that, so there was a lot to do for them. They did this. They did it incorrectly. In fact, it's still wrong. what we discovered in November is that roughly, we'll call it 3,500, it was a little less than that, parcels were wrong on the property tax reduction due to the calculation that was received. So we had to do a lot of work to back all this stuff out of this system, figure that out. Lots of testing was done. Then the assessor had to go recalculate the way it should have been done. And then we had to go push all that through and make sure, there's situations, where they're taking payments. It's got very, very complicated in order to, because you've got interest going on, you've got all kinds of different things are taking place. And this is an effective dated system. So it took about 6 to 8 weeks. So that 6 to 8 weeks spent in November and December, then pushed everything else that they normally do out. So now we're sitting here stuck with these 125 parcels that need to be dealt with. Had they had the time, and not dealt with this other problem, more than likely this would have came up, because it instantly came up once everybody moved their attention forward. So anyway, I hope that helps kind of giving you a little bit of a status on how we ended up here.
Okay. Any questions for Sam?
Actually, Sam, I'm glad that you joined us. This is Commissioner Bruce Matari. First of all, I just really want to thank you for what you've done and for your assistance. It means a lot, and I've been kind of keeping tabs with what's been going on in the background, and so I would like to thank you for your help and your assistance in this, because I know, just from my experience with software, it can be a real challenge to try to unwind some of the systems that are in place here. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that, and I couldn't agree more with your unwind comment. And please know, if you ever want to reach out and just talk to me, or any of the commissioners on what we're doing or where things are at, I'd be happy. Bailey has my contact information. Please do so.
Oh, well, good. Well, thank you. So now, just from for the board's own information, there is a lot of work that has to be done to fix this software, and this is a much bigger discussion. Right now, what we're dealing with, I think, are just trying to address some of these parcels now.
Yes,
So we can get that done.
yes.
And I guess the only other question I would have, and this is for the assessor, is what is our deadline? When do we need to do this by?
Well, ideally, this week, get this done this week, so if we can get a subsequent meeting scheduled with the board, BOE meeting, the board can meet monthly. I'd ask that the board please consider doing that so that we can get this information, the details presented to you, and our recommendation. And I want to say, if it were up to me to implement these system fixes to alleviate the manual work that has to happen, I would certainly do it. I had another conversation with the tax commission this morning, and they said, really, Bailey, it's all about the integrity of the record. We're done with the 2023 assessments and the notices that had gone out. We need to have a roll that has been certified that matches those notices. And so that's kind of where we are. It's kind of water under the bridge. They also said that this does not affect levy rates. This is just a matter of record. And so we're asking that the board please consider that. And I will coordinate with your office to get something scheduled later this week. And my apologies to the board as well as to the treasurer's office. We certainly wanted to implement this if we could do it.
The only other comment I would have is that, and this includes you, Sam, is my hope is that the two departments, the treasurer's office and the assessor's office, and your company can kind of coordinate a plan, if it's even possible, to try to address these software issues so that moving forward to next year, we can actually have something running that hopefully won't lead to these kinds of discoveries after the fact.
And Commissioner, I would like to tell you that we have been working on it. You and I met in my office.
We've discussed that.
And talked about this. I just got a legal counsel review back today on the contract modification. We've identified 15 changes. XTR was able to get a hold of the database the Canyon County database, where their system works pretty flawlessly with and so we're going to model after that. So we're going to bring this back to the board on a separate matter.
Yeah, and that's one other thing too that I would recommend to the board is that we look at emulating, we pick a county and we work side by side with that county so we can get the benefit of additional knowledge base about what the assessor and the treasurer are doing, and also not have this system that is so unique that it's harder to get support. And so I would recommend that as we move down this pathway, that we pick our sister county, if you will, to emulate and model after.
Treasurer's office?
So there have been several topics brought up, so forgive me if I squirrel around a little bit. Certainly we have system errors. The issues we've had this year, the system hasn't changed. We were successful in previous years. What's changed is we used to have appraisal techs, and when the new people came into the appraisal tech positions and the appraisal techs were changed to BIAs, even though there are dozens of documents in the system outlining what the techs did, those weren't reviewed or followed, and so the processes that they had in place to make sure these issues didn't happen didn't occur this year. So yes, the system is at fault partially, but where we are today is not totally the system. The treasurer's office absolutely agrees that we want to bring ourselves so that we're more in line with the rest of the Almonton counties in the state, but there were identified workarounds that have worked for many, many years, and we wouldn't be here. The State Tax Commission apparently told Bela that we needed to get these abstracts done and we were out of time. I have an email dated March 14th of last year, and in this email, the state says, Bela had asked if the property tax rolls could be revised on March 14th, 2023. The ISTC response was they don't have an issue with the revision of the abstracts to make the corrections. Go ahead and make corrections and rerun the abstracts. All of these notices, including the 125 parcels that we're discussing, corrected notices were sent out for those 125 parcels. So if you make changes, for the notices to match the abstract, we have to put the correction in the system. It was 25 parcels where the land was double assessed, and those were initially on a subsequent roll. They've since been moved to the occupancy roll. There were 1,100 and change parcels on the occupancy roll. There are 9 parcels that we're not discussing where a new process was used and a change was pushed through to the treasurer's side. Luckily, we happened to talk to one of the taxpayers that was affected, because otherwise I don't know how we would have found these 9 accounts out of the 100,000 parcels in the county. But the charge it was something that they had not used before in the assessor's office, and they literally changed the taxes due so that the taxes due showing in our system are not correct after the fact. We don't know how to fix those. We had one where the person needed to pay the taxes because I think it was to do with an estate, and we basically jerry-rigged a statement because we could do the math and know what they should have paid. But if you look at the numbers for the value, for the levy rates, and then the total due, it doesn't match. We're in the same position for the other 101 parcels, that it's not just reducing the land value. We don't know what the issue is. We don't know even if we can really fix it using a tax cancellation. But knowing that March 14th of 2023 wasn't too late to be making fixes to an abstract or a roll makes me believe that we can still make those fixes now in 2024, because it's not March 14th yet. The other thing is, yes, there's a due date. There's no enforcement to the due dates. As Bela already stated, we've missed that due date. That ship sailed. So why are we now not going to finish the thing that we've been working on for 6 weeks and correct the amounts due in the system, correct the values in the system, and move forward with you canceling or telling us to cancel?
Commissioners, if I may, I'd like to respond. I do have some additional information I can respond to that. When I had the conversation with Alan Dornfest last year, not everything is memorialized in an email. The conversation that I had with Alan Dornfest last year, he did tell me, and the board might recall that last year was a year where the entire state engaged in changes in the rulemaking process and changes in adopted rule. All of the counties got together and worked on changing and revising IDAPA, the tax rule, 35.01.03. When I had the conversation with Alan Dornfest last year, he said, yes, based upon the way the laws are written, it's not as clear as they'd like it to be, but they were going to focus on modifying the rules to make it much more clear that it has to be completed by the end of January. Alan Dornfest said that to me last year, although he did not stand in the way of us correcting it last year. We are now 1 year hence from last year, and I have guidance from the tax commissions telling me now that we should be done by the end of January, and I would like to abide by the guidance that I'm receiving from the tax commission.
We've already missed that deadline.
Correct.
I also don't know if those rules have been approved by the legislature yet. I know that they were being put in front of the legislature this year. Specifically, when that
approved.
discussion was being had, it was with regard to the fact that we were the only county in the state that, in addition to our end-of-year rolls, we had another, we called it missed occupancy. It was a spreadsheet, and we manually created bills, and we collected the money outside of the system. And specifically, the thing that they were looking at with that rule was eliminating us continuing that practice of having a missed roll that was not in the system. It's a little...
It was called the omitted occupancy that was unique to Kootenai County, and Jill is right about that, but it was not specifically and only limited to that. My conversations with Alan Dornfest encompassed missed property rolls as well as the omitted occupancy roll that Kootenai County does. Bottom line is, Jill is correct, we are beyond the end of January. It doesn't change the guidance that the tax commission has given me. It is outside of my scope, of my authority, and that's why I'm bringing it to the board. If I could make those changes within my authority, I would be certainly happy and wanting it. It's going to impact our department as well. We don't want to do the manual changes, but I am left with no other option at this point. It's now the authority of the board, and I'm bringing it to the board.
So is this a tax cancellation, or is this a Board of Equalization?
It's all under the authority of the Board of Equalization. It is a combination of tax cancellation, recovery under 63602G5, and its allocation or calculation errors. And so all of that is under the board of the county commissioners, according to the guidance I received from the tax commission.
All right, well, Board of Equalization does not cancel taxes, so we might have to deal with this in two separate meetings.
Perhaps. Well, it's the Board of County Commissioners. If I misspoke, I apologize for that, but it's all, whether it's tax cancellation, 63-1302, 1303, or the authority of the board under 63501.
Can I bring up one, since we're in the room together, these occupancy assessment notices were sent out. The initial mail date was December 29th, and then the 100 and some odd corrections were January 25th or 26th. I can't see it. So in statute, in 63-317, it very specifically says when you send out an occupancy notice that you're supposed to give the taxpayer a 28-day right to appeal, specific to the occupancy roll, in the occupancy roll statute. We gave them 14 days. Steve has since reached out to Bela and said that as a treasurer's office, we don't feel comfortable sending a bill to someone that has not been given an adequate period to appeal. When we were discussing the omitted occupancy roll last year, it was made very clear to us, because in that notice, there hadn't been given the right to appeal. It was made very clear to us by the State Tax Commission that those notices had to be resent with a 30-day right to appeal before the treasurer's office could bill. I don't think we've heard back from Bela as to whether he's going to resend those notices. It would be good for us to know when they're going to be resent, because then we need the 28 days and we can plan on getting those bills out. The farther we get into this year, the less time we're giving people to pay their occupancy bill in 2 installments. So normally we would have gotten these bills out first week of February. Their due date would be March 20th. That gives them one payment due March 20th and the second payment due June 20th. The longer we wait to solve this or resolve this, the shorter time frame they get, and we're effectively pushing two payments into one.
I just wanted to make note, sorry, that from a clerk's standpoint, not that I want to get in the middle of this, we have a deadline of March, the first Monday of March to get the values to the State Tax Commission, and by the fourth Monday of March to the taxing districts. So whatever's decided, I just want you guys to be aware that we need, realistically, we need a rule that's been reviewed and signed by our clerk by next Monday.
And I did have that conversation with the tax commission this morning, and that's why earlier when I spoke, I did say this week, because we got to get it done by Monday. I would like to speak to the issue that Jill raised. I believe you said your question was in regards to the 125 or no.
To all 1,100. But the first 1,100, you gave them 14 days to appeal instead of the 28 days
No, but
that's
you
in
said,
statute.
you said are you asking for corrections to all notices? I'm not.
Based on what you did last year, when we were notified we hadn't given an adequate time period to appeal, I would think you'd resend the assessment notices, give them 28 days to appeal, after which we could comfortably bill them, because we have not deprived them of their statutory right to appeal.
So if you, and I did respond to the treasurer's office, I did recite the various statutes that we're dealing with here. I went back and I looked historically at all the years before I was assessor. And historically, Kootenai County, when Kootenai County does the end of the year roll process, has historically given anywhere from 16 to 15 or 14 days notice for the end of the year roll. It's a combination of the statutes that I did recite in the email that I responded to you. There's even one statute which is under the authority of the board which says 10 days. I don't know why the Kootenai County has historically done the process that it has, but it's a combination of anywhere from 14 to 16 days historically that Kootenai County has done at the end of the year roll process.
And oh, sorry. I don't know what Kootenai County has done historically. I know we found out last year that the historically produced omitted occupancy roll wasn't something we should have been doing. I became very aware last year of the time period that we needed to allow for occupancy appeals. Whether we did it correctly historically or not, as of last year, we were made aware that we needed to give the 28 days. Why would I think it would be okay to not follow that now that I'm aware?
And she's speaking specifically of the occupancy, because that was specific direction that we received,
And
28 days notice.
And it's in statute.
She's speaking of the omitted occupancy, which was a unique Kootenai County process, which really Kootenai County should never have done, but it's done for 20 years.
There is a statute for occupancies that specifically says 28 days. Are you going to give the people their statutorily required 28 days to appeal?
We abided by the process that Kootenai County has historically used. I sought guidance.
Is that a no?
I sought guidance from the tax commission, and this is the guidance that I received.
Is that a no?
If you're talking about the 125
No, the 11,
corrected notices, we will be responding to those property owners that got the 125 corrected notices, which we should not have done. We will respond to them and address any confusion. At this point, according to the guidance of the tax commission, 2023 is done.
All right, so I see a couple different things here. I actually have to leave at 11:30, so at the beginning of this meeting, I didn't think we could push upon that, but here we are. I think maybe some counsel would be nice. I don't know if the treasurer would like to seek that counsel, or if Bela would, or maybe both. I don't know. To figure out about those 1,100 properties. As far as these 125 properties, we have time at 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 29th, which would satisfy the first Monday in March. So please work with staff. I'm not going to be able to help you if that's a Board of Equalization, we're just changing values, or if we're canceling taxes, or what's happening there. So you'll need to figure that out. March 6th, we have a cancellation of taxes meeting. I will not be here, but March 13th, we have another Board of Equalization meeting.
I'm aware of that.
Yes, so the March 6th, if the board chooses, if they would like me here, then we'll move that meeting to the 13th. If not, if you guys would handle it on your own, then we can keep the meeting there, so.
I'd like to finish up one thing, if I may, Commissioner, by saying that in my conversation with the Tax Commission this morning, I did ask them, what is the prospects if the board decides against our recommendation? I would be then in a position to certify a roll that is incorrect, knowing that it's incorrect. And the Tax Commission simply said, it's just a matter of record. It would have to match, for integrity purposes, it has to match the notices that went out. It would be of no significance or no consequence. And so I'm prepared, should we not be able to get this accomplished with the board, I'm prepared to sign the rolls as is, certify it, and deliver it on Monday.
And just because I'm confused, I think you just said that the roll has to match the notices that have been sent. You've now sent corrected notices for those 125 accounts that we're referring to. So for the roll to match the notices, we have to make those changes in the system and not put them in front of the BOE or the BOCC as a cancellation or valuation change. Do I understand that correctly?
It is my recommendation that we do have the meeting with the board, and that we get that accomplished this week. We are going to be notifying the property owners for those 125 parcels that those notices were incorrect, that we're going to stand with the original notices that went out at the end of December. The corrections that need to be made can be made through manual calculations or manual tax cancellations. So the outcome will be the same. The outcome will be that the property owners that should be assessed at certain values will be assessed correctly as a net result of the corrections, the manual corrections, the manual tax cancellations, or the recovery of the homeowner's exemption.
Can I ask something really quick, Bruce? I'm so sorry. When, after the rolls go to BOE, and let's say they change something, and maybe Dyson, I'll speak to you specifically, if they make a recommendation to change one of the values, then you go back and adjust the roll, correct? The reason I'm asking this is my conversation based on statute with both Alan and Ben, and it just clicked just a little bit ago, otherwise I would have said it when I was up here earlier. Anyway, the January deadline is for the pre-BOE rolls. Then it goes to BOE, you guys make your ruling, and then the final rules are, then the assessor's office makes the adjustments. Those rules are what are due to us by the first Monday in March.
Yeah, the BOE has their meeting in January, but the statute says, in no event shall it be before the first Monday of January. So
Right.
sometime in January, the board, and typically we coordinate with the board, we find out what the date of the BOE meeting will be in January. Usually it's somewhere around the 12th to the 17th of January.
Right, but I guess my question is based on everything that was just said. Even if we are after whatever date, you did the pre-BOE rolls, it's been presented, now you know you have an issue and some changes need to be made. If the board reconvenes as the BOE and approves those changes, then my understanding would be that you would make those changes to the roll, the final roll that then would be due to us by, realistically by next week. So I guess my question then is, I think then it says to me that you're not totally correct, Bela, in saying that you guys can't make those changes based on statute because the pre-BOE rule is not set, in stone.
I understand what you're saying. Notwithstanding that, that is the guidance that I've received from the Tax Commission. So it's not me saying it, it's the Tax Commission.
Can I ask a couple of questions here? Because, the way you're citing statute, and I understand that, and those are the guideposts for what each of the elected officials are supposed to be doing. What if, obviously, in the end, we're trying to do what's best for the
Correct.
property owners, okay? That's really what it comes down to, is doing what's best for them. So if you're not following statute, and you still have this deadline, and you brought this to the board's attention and says, look, we can fix this programmatically, and this will serve the property owners the best, why don't we look at doing that? You brought it to our attention. We're all aware. I believe it'll work best for the treasurer's office. You still have time to do it. I don't think the board would object, because what you're suggesting is that due to statute, we must hand change all of these properties. And that creates a domino effect in other departments. But it will have zero difference to the ultimate property owner. Is that correct?
Right, so the answer to your question is, when we set this meeting up for today, last week, we still did not know the status of the testing by the treasurer's office. I believe I learned in an email this morning, today, or maybe yesterday, that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, that you've been able to finalize your testing now late last week.
We are still in the process of reviewing the changes to make sure that there wasn't an unintended impact on how the taxes were calculated. But we should be able to have the answer to that in the next day or so.
So we're trying to answer your question, but we don't even know the consequences.
But you're close to it, though. You're close to
My
it.
understanding is we're close, but it depends on the testing,
And
which is beyond my control.
This is just my opinion. I'm a taxpayer that was one of these 125 accounts. I got an assessment notice in December. Okay. Then I got a corrected assessment notice in January. And now I'm going to get a phone call saying, ignore your corrected assessment notice. But, in a month or two, we'll change the taxes due again for you. It's not a good look for us.
Well, I think in the end, what we have to focus on is doing what's best and right for the property owners. And, assuming we could get an opinion from council,
Sure.
I would be more inclined to go with having you fix the role programmatically and avoiding this additional work that's going to lead to additional work with other departments and more confusion with the property owner.
I'm open to getting an opinion from legal counsel and moving in the direction that is recommended by legal counsel. I'm not opposed to that.
That's how I see
Yeah.
this serving people the best. You brought it to our attention. Thank you. Everyone's here, but let's figure out the way to do this the most efficient way that has the same outcome and works for our property owners.
Granted, and let's not fail to recognize that either approach is doing what's right for the taxpayer, to make the assessment correct and to either correct the doubled homeowner's exemption or make corrections to the calculations. The outcome would be the same. So, but the
not necessarily.
programmatic fix is the best.
Yes, not necessarily, because the additional resources and time that are required from staff, who are pretty full right now with their time, is not the best use for taxpayers. But I understand. I understand your point.
Understanding, yeah, and the fact that the reason we're here is because we weren't making progress through last week, and we were at the point of where we had to do something.
All right, so hopefully, what I would do is I would put the meeting up for the board, so we have it. We can always cancel a meeting, right? So let's do that, and then
11 a.m.
we can hear from the treasurer's office, and hopefully the testing will yield, good results. And then with that said, I would also talk with council and just, run through a couple scenarios there. And if we can get this done programmatically, if the board has to have some official say in that, because this is just a discussion, then I think we should make it. But from my perspective, if it's going to work the most efficient way and have the same outcome and serve the taxpayer, I'm good with that.
And for expedience sake, I probably would ask the treasurer to seek legal counsel, because I think that might be a little bit quicker.
And if we need to have the state tax commission during that meeting on the line, I'm sure Alan and Ben both would be able to clear things up for us if we needed that.
Okay.
So we're going to have a meeting Thursday, 11 a.m., 29th.
We're scheduling a meeting, yes.
Okay. We're going to hear back from the treasurer on the testing when?
Okay, your microphone, sorry, Jill.
Do you have an idea?
If not by the end of the day today, early tomorrow.
Perfect.
And we're ready to implement the changes on our side, so.
Okay, well,
It'll be quick once we get the green light. We just don't want to have more unintended tax problems pop up.
let's contact the Civil Division of the Prosecuting Attorney's Office and
Elected official meeting of 10 to 2 that day?
It's just 10 to.
10 to a noon, I mean?
Right, but we're not going to be, I'll tell you right now, we're not going to spend 2 hours at that elected officials meeting. So we'll make sure of that.
okay.
But yes, so 11 o'clock on Thursdays.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, item 5, would you guys like to pick what you would like me to update you on? Because I have 5 minutes. And I know Sylvia's on the phone for the PMR Clinic, so if we want to start there. We can do that.
We had a meeting last week, or, we kind of know what's going on with that. The coroner.
Okay, so the coroner, the construction grant that he had presented was an actual 2023 grant. The 24 grant is not for construction. So we have a little bit of breathing room there and less pressure with the time constraints of that grant. So they're going to be looking at other grants. They're going to be looking at when there is a construction grant for that area, they'll apply for that then. So, and then in the meantime, they'll bring forward a request to hire an outside grant writer who has experience in that. And then Town Hall on March 27th with the coroner and the prosecutor and myself to talk to the public about the need going forward and the challenges that the prosecutor has had, the way the system is working currently. So, all right, I want to make sure, do we have any other public comment today? Okay, then I have a few more minutes. Syl, did you want to just say what's going on with PMR?
Sure. This is Sylvia Proud for the record. In terms of PMR, on March 1st, we began having access to our clinic. Currently, Greg would have been at this meeting today, but he was at the clinic with our subcontractors to get pricing on the different aspects of the renovations, so the flooring, plumbing, moving a bathroom, those sort of things. This week, the landlords are conducting the abatement that was necessary for the lease. So Friday the 1st, we should be good to go with full access to that clinic. Yesterday, in terms of patient engagement, we're starting communication with all staff regarding clinical services. The week of March 17th, PMR engagement team will be here to host informational meetings at various work sites with the elected officials and department heads. And that's pretty much the update so far. Any questions?
Any questions for Sylvia?
Nope.
No? All right. Maybe I have 2 minutes for one more. Transit Department. The triennial review has been scheduled for April 17th and 18th, so that's fantastic because it could have been as late as August or September. And then on April 16th, we will have a workshop from 9 a.m. to noon with our Transit Department and a couple of, I guess they were contractors for us, developing their plan. So we'll do that, and then that way, if any one of us wants to be part of the triennial visit on the 17th and 18th, we should be up to speed from the workshop. And March 11th, meeting with HR to get the job descriptions finalized so we can bring them the following week at the HR meeting. So, any questions on transit? No?
I guess when you say we in a workshop, is this like open to the public?
Yeah,
Is this?
it is. It's for the commissioners, and
Okay.
it's a presentation from the Transit Department and some of their contractors in order to get us up to speed on some of the more technical issues that are just more technical and not so intuitive. So, okay. One more time for public comment. You have about 30 seconds. Okay, nothing. All right, 11:30, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sam.